Chapter 2.
"Intruders on the bridge!"
screamed the captain. Will looked around startled. He was suddenly standing in the middle of the bustling control room of some kind of naval vessel, which, judging by the lack of portholes and the hissing valve-covered pipes that lined the walls, must be a submarine. Startled sailors wearing a weird assortment of uniforms turned from their stations and stared at him with surprised expressions. Sitting on a golden throne in the center of the room was a huge man wearing an elaborate but faded naval uniform with lots of gold braid and a giant black tricorn hat that was matched by the equally enormous bushy black beard on his chin.
"Looks like we've got ourselves a saboteur, lads," the captain shouted, his mouth opening in a broad grin that showed teeth made from a number of different metals and woods, as well as the more traditional enamel. "Worse than that, a naked saboteur."
Will looked down at the bubbles he was wearing before blushing and grabbing the towel that Randolph was holding out to him and wrapping it around his waist.
"It's a brave man who sneaks on board Captain Halibut's submarine," he said, leaning down towards Will. "But to do it without clothes, well, that takes guts. Tell us your name, lad, before we make you walk the plank as a saboteur."
I'm not a saboteur, Will said.
"I don't even know what that is," Randolph said. "But if Will isn't one, I'm not one either." "Well then, if you're not here to try and sink the killer Kipper, what business do you have appearing out of thin air, naked on her bridge?" Captain Halibut demanded.
We're, stowaways, Will said, his mind racing. We're so poor that we had to sell our clothes for food. That's why we're naked.
"I'm not naked,"
Randolph said indignantly, before stopping to think for a moment.
"Oh, yes, good. Carry on."
Our only hope was to start a new life at sea, Will said. So we snuck on board in the hope that we could, join your famous crew.
"What are we famous for?" asked the captain.
Being fair, kind and understanding, said William, trying not to sound desperate. Upside-Down Bird fluttered down from the ceiling where she had quietly perched to watch the proceedings and landed on Will's shoulder. I even brought my own parrot, Will said quickly. That's how much I want to be a pirate.
"Squawk!"
Upside-Down Bird screeched, doing a reasonably good impression of a parrot. Captain Halibut leapt to his feet with surprising speed and took Upside-Down Bird from Will's shoulder, cupping her gently in his hands.
"She's a fine bird," Captain Halibut said, a tear starting to form in the corner of his eye as he stroked Upside-Down Bird. "She reminds me of my own Esmeralda." He gestured towards the portrait of a parrot that hung beside an empty cage next to his throne. "The finest bird who ever lived." He hugged Upside-Down Bird close to his bristly cheek as a single tear rolled down into his beard. Will and the rest of the gathered crew looked slightly embarrassed for a moment as their captain wiped the tear from his cheek and gently placed Upside-Down Bird inside the vacant cage. He locked the cage door with a small key that he kept on a chain around his neck. "You've managed to touch an old pirate's heart by bringing me a new bird," the captain said, placing a hand on the cage. "So, as a sign of my gratitude, I'll not be making you both walk the plank. You, young stowaway, or your furry companion. Instead, we'll put ye to work swabbing the decks. Yar! Do ye have any swabbing experience?" Captain Halibut asked.